Thanks very much. Looks like our recording has started. So I just want to warmly welcome you to the second annual EcoHealth Global Summit 2023. We're so excited to have you here for the Western Europe session. My name's Evan Griffith. I'm a PhD candidate at Tufts University and one of the EcoHealth early career representatives that's been helping to plan this event. So I just want to give you a brief background of the event. So it was first implemented last year in 2022 by the EcoHealth International External Advisory Group, chaired by Dr. Margot Parks, and the EcoHealth International Early Career Coordinator, Angel Kennedy, who is happily here with us this session. The Global Summit emerged out of a desire to foster unique and connected spaces for ecological and equity-informed innovation, integration, and global synergies to improve health for all. A commitment that increasingly demands us to nurture connections and relationships across regional context, disciplines, sectors, and generations. In this spirit of working in new ways and connecting 24 hours of conversations around the planet for a common goal of advancing a healthy, just, and sustainable future. So the nickname of the summit is the Earth Hug. Given its previous success and actual success this year as well already, I'm happy to say, we are running the Global Summit annually, so we look forward to inviting you back next year. So far, our summit conversation has included West and South Africa and Eastern Europe before this. We have an incredible group of thought leaders, early career colleagues, activists, and researchers on our panels today. The theme of the summit and what we will be focusing the discussion on is working together for a healthy, just, and sustainable future. So before we get started with our first panel, I'd just like to ask Angel to give a brief update from the previous session, so we kind of know how things have been going so far.
Thanks, Evan. And it'll be hard to do because it was such a rich conversation. So we'll try here. But the East Europe EcoHealth session showcased a really rich tapestry of perspectives and experience, spanning veterinary epidemiology, core competencies for One Health, ecological indicators in river monitoring, urban fox adaptation, gender and social inclusion, and air pollution inequities. Stacy introduced the COHFE framework, emphasizing its global applicability and the need for a comprehensive transdisciplinary approach. Simon explored competencies essential for One Health, probing existing workforce readiness and educational infrastructure. Delina shared light on using benthic macroinvertebrates as ecological indicators for water health, while Olivia discussed the challenges and concerns associated with urban fox adaptation. And then we went really deep into gender disparities, and Bridget highlighted these disparities in media and journalism, emphasizing the need for inclusive communication. And the discussions delved into issues of contention and citizen engagement, transdisciplinarity, and environmental impact assessment, with Sarah then providing insights into gender equality plans in European projects and the needing to fill gaps between documentation and implementation. Overall, the session underscored the importance of holistic, collaborative approaches in addressing global health and environmental challenges with a focus on inclusivity, competency building, and recognizing the intrinsic connections between human, animal, and ecosystem health. So really excited for this session, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much, Angel, for that excellent outline. And I believe that was written by one of our volunteers. And we have some incredible volunteers today and tomorrow, manning the chat box and everything. So please feel free during the session to put your questions in the chat. We want to have as an interactive experience here as possible. So for the first panel, we have about 40 minutes, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Zinstag, Ms. Konzak, and Dr. Rabiati, who is a late and wonderful addition. Thank you so much to start with this panel. I think we'll start with Dr. Zinstag, who does have some slides to share. So if you want to share your slides. And the way that this first kind of topic will work is we'll have about 5 minutes per person to discuss a topic or something related to the theme of the event. And then after that, I'll be following up and asking some other questions. So please take it away, Dr. Zinsteg.
Thank you very much, Evan. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Good. So as a former president of the International Association of Ecology and Health, I'm very pleased to see the next generation taking over and running the show again after some delays. But it's a great pleasure to see that this is working again. And I honestly feel also in a better way that we don't travel all around the globe again to meet, but that we can use the advanced video connections to talk to each other. Of course, sometimes it's good to meet, but let me quickly introduce you to what we are currently doing. So I'm really concentrating on One Health since more than 25 years, but we made a big move that I would like to share with you, that we formally consider social ecological systems as foundational to combining sustainable natural resource management and healthcare for all species. What does that mean? All what I say is in that textbook, and there is a Mandarin translation forthcoming. And what we understand as One Health is, first of all, that we recognize the inextricable linkage of humans, animals, and the environment. But that is not enough. If we claim to do One Health, we should really produce an incremental benefit from working together in terms of human and animal health and well-being, but also financial savings, social resilience, and environmental sustainability from a closer cooperation of human and animal health and other sectors that we could not achieve otherwise. So far, so good. This is where we produce case examples that really prove that incremental benefit. But how to bring this together with natural resource management? And here we are inspired by Elinor Ostrom's Governing of the Commons. Elinor Ostrom got the Nobel Prize in economics in 2008 as a first woman economist. And she contested the so-called tragedy of the commons by Hardin, which means that if we have common pool resources, they are invariably overused. And she says that this is true in general, but not always. There are many communities in the world who manage their natural resources in a sustainable way since centuries. And one of her first examples in that very book is a mountain village in Switzerland called Törbel, where the mountain farmers manage their natural resources in terms of forest, meadows, and water since 700 years in a written way, of course at the cost of stabilizing human population size. Elinor Ostrom uses the concept of social ecological system, which is composed of resource systems on the top left, of resource units. So, for example, a resource system of forests would have logs that you harvest, or if you have pasture, you would have animals that you raise, or if you have water bodies, it would be fish or other seafood that you can harvest. But you want to harvest it in a sustainable way. You can only do this if the actors agree to cooperate and if they have clear rules how to govern their resources. So if you look carefully in that resource system, humans are not part of it. And this is what we add to the natural resource systems to the social ecological systems of Elinor Ostrom. we add humans as a resource. And of course, animals are already built in by the, for example, pasture resources, but humans as such were not included. So what are human resource units? Of course, you have human lives, but you should also consider human capital benefits. What does that mean? If a child dies at 10 years of age from rabies, 40 years of productive life are lost to the nation. So if you can control rabies and save the child's life, you can save these human capital benefits. We have also expanded the actors from households up to regional and international actors, and we have also broken down the governance systems from the household governance up to international governance. And we have applied this to the example of rabies control in Africa. Basically, the actors agree on strategies of interventions. So the strategies of interventions that we compare here is human post-exposure prophylaxis. This is what you can do if you are bitten by a rabid dog, but you will never eliminate the disease by that. But if you start mass vaccinating dogs, then you can eliminate rabies and you have higher human capital benefits. So we find the highest human capital benefits from coordinated mass vaccination of dogs, which eventually leads to the elimination of rabies. So we would save 10 billion US dollar in 30 years if we started to do that next year. What does that mean? If South Africa would start mass vaccinating, it would coordinate the campaigns with Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and dog rabies would not return to South Africa, and so on. Similarly, if Mauritania would start mass vaccinating, it would coordinate the dogs and it would coordinate with Mali and Senegal. Rabies would not come back to Mauritania. Here you see the effect of human capital benefits. On the left side, you see the red squares are human post-exposure prophylaxis, and the red squares are dog mass vaccination. So for most countries, dog mass vaccination becomes the best strategy individually, with a few exceptions of countries who have a high coverage in post-exposure prophylaxis. But if you add the human capital effect, you see that for all African countries, coordinated dog mass vaccination is always the best strategy, is the Pareto most efficient way, and leads to the elimination of the disease. This is the first example applying a game theoretical approach to One Health, and we want to generate now many more examples showing how we can provide healthcare and provide natural resources for sustainable use. I'm also the editor-in-chief of KB One Health, which is a platform with an online journal, a case study database, and a knowledge base bringing together evidence of the incremental benefit of closer cooperation of human, plant, animal, and environmental health. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. Who would like to go next? Either Anne, Kristen, or Claudia.
I will stop sharing.
Oh. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I can go, Evan. I don't know
if
you. Okay, if you're going to ask us questions, or should I?
Yeah, so I can ask. So the first topic here is, first basically an introduction, and then give an example of your work that relates to our theme of working towards a healthy, just, and sustainable future. And of course, the details of that, whatever you think is relevant.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, first of all, it's very nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me. It's a very interesting platform. So I was exploring the system. I don't remember the name, but it's a lot of information. It's very interesting. So regarding your question, I was thinking about which kind of initiatives. Well, but maybe first of all, I should also introduce myself, sorry, because I thought you already introduced us. Sorry. So my name is Claudia Robbiati, and I work at the Italian National Institute of Health, and especially at the National Center for Global Health. And we work a lot with the One Health approach, in supporting different countries or around the world, and learning from each other. And so going back to the initiatives, I thought about it, and as I said, I work in One Health mainly, and two interesting initiatives came up to my mind. One is at institutional level. So as I said, I work for the Italian National Institute of Health, and during the G20 21, under the Italian presidency, the Institute was asked to produce a policy brief for the Think 20 of the G20 21. And therefore, within the Institute, we collaborated for this purpose. And as you can imagine, in the Institute, we have all the different expertise related to public health. And so it was quite challenging because it was 2021 and we started to work in 2020 during COVID-19 pandemic. And it was actually really actual, the policy brief, because it was about One Health prevention and preparedness for pandemics and generally for health threats. And therefore, we worked with different expertise within the institute, trying to maximize all these, huge availability of competencies we have, but sometimes we don't, exploit, because sometimes we work, like. Each sector by itself. And so it was challenging because it was mostly online, but we managed to, through a strong leadership, I think it was the main enabling factors, we managed to create this working group that actually was then established after this first initiative. And it was very interesting and very productive. And the second initiative I want to share is more at the grassroots level, and it's the Women for One Health network. So this is a network that was born during the World One Health Congress 2022 in Singapore, and a group of women participating to this Congress decided to create this network to support inclusive and equitable approaches to One Health. And since then, the network has grown a lot. We are more than 200 women from all the regions of the world, all the expertise from different ages, and it's really amazing. I mean, because there's this willingness, of all these women to meet once a month at least, and then we have other groups, working on different topics, and so we discuss initiatives, activities, and other topics related to One Health research and events. And yeah, so these two initiatives, among many, came up to my mind to be, shared with you during this meeting, to this summit today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, and especially the Women for One Health Network, which I just recently learned about through the summit. Sounds incredible, and actually aligns really well with a lot of gender topics we were discussing from the last session. So I think we're kind of pulling that out of these sessions. And Kristen, would you like to give an introduction and then talk about a topic that relates to the theme?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for having me as well. My name is Ann-Christine Konzak, and I am from the International Alliance Against Health Abuse and Wildlife Trade. And my personal background is more in the humanities from international relations and global political economy, as well as public policies, and then specialized in Latin America. So for me, it's very interesting to kind of come into this field of work from from kind of a different background from the humanities. So yeah, it's very interesting. And yeah, first of all, I wanted to share maybe a bit of personal reflections on the theme, because I think, well, the theme is great, of course, but yeah, kind of based on my background, working together for a healthy, just, and sustainable future. Like the first questions that come to my mind is kind of to how to get to a common understanding, and then how to act upon it. So I think this is also like a very important discussion to have, and then also especially, you know, picking maybe the aspect of justice. If you look at different contexts in different regions, and also just historically, like historical injustices, interspecies equity, I think there's like a lot that you can consider when you think about how to reach this common understanding. And then I think to kind of reach this understanding, you have to create spaces for dialogues. And then kind of connected to that, I think the International Alliance is actually quite a good example maybe to give, because we are a multi-stakeholder platform that is exactly aiming at bringing different actors together to kind of, have this kind of dialogues. And of course, we're specialized on health, forest, and wildlife trade. But I think the unique thing of this is that we're really trying to vertically and horizontally bring people together to create the space. And our purpose is like to connect, to convene, and to catalyze, and to have this inclusive network and give people the space. And I think also the other unique thing that we're doing is to bring those organizations and individuals together that might have different agendas, but eventually still a common goal. And yeah, most specifically, we do that through generally like online events where we have expert talks and voices from the ground, where we're really trying to showcase different initiatives to then get in contact and get in touch with other maybe similar projects, and then so that they can share their experiences, see what they're maybe struggling with, also the lessons learned, so that we can all learn from each other, and that there is kind of this breaking of silos. But we also have projects that are on the ground, so we're also trying to get kind of lessons learned from really on the ground experiences, and then eventually kind of close the gap between the science and the evidence that we have, and then maybe also the implementation and the policy side of it. And for that, I mean, like, of course, the One Health approach kind of brings all of these aspects together. So this is really what we're trying to do. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. The sort of second topic that I'd like to discuss today is a bit of more challenges that you face in your work. And something that I heard, you know, in your introductions is specifically this idea of breaking down silos. Of course, collaborating across disciplines, which is inherent to EcoHealth and One Health. So I wonder if each one of you could maybe just discuss, you know, what are the actual strategies that we need to do that? You know, you just talked about online events. In my experience, you know, even when you bring people together who have different viewpoints, it can be quite difficult to sort of have that shared experience. So if the speakers can maybe just reflect on, you know, what they've found successful, or, you know, strategies to tackle that.
I can say something. So I absolutely agree with you, Evan. It's really difficult working together, you know, because, you know, and for many reasons that could be, you know, structural, personal. But I think that one thing that is very important is mindset, you know, so of course, each one of us should be supported, you know, to change our mindset since university, I think. So starting to, you know, have a more system thinking approach studying, I don't know, multidisciplinary approaches to science, because when we study at uni, it's, you know, one course you study, I don't know, you study only cell biology, the other course you study only zoology, and then, you know, sometimes you miss all the interconnections. But, you know, I think that change of mindset should go together with change of governance, because of course, you know, change of mindset is fundamental, but it's not enough, you know, because at the end of the day, if you have the perfect mindset, but then the governance of your institution, organization, company, whatever, doesn't enable collaboration, you can't really, you know, collaborate effectively. So I think that these are the two, in my vision, the two main challenges we have. So mindset and governance that should go at the same pace. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really important reflection. Jakob or Ann-Kristin, did you have also some examples or thoughts about that topic?
Yeah, maybe I can add on that, because what I was thinking about is maybe also the language barriers, and maybe also if you want to work together and be truly inclusive, I think that's also kind of a challenging part, how to be truly inclusive, because especially if you think about different systems, and if you're educated or grow up in a specific paradigm, how can you combine this? Because I think this can sometimes like clash on how we view the world in different cultural settings. So I think this is like very challenging. And then, yeah, at the same time, also the language barriers, which is maybe also connected to some cultural concepts that we need to understand. But just like how the education system is maybe then like limited because you don't have access to specific sources of knowledge because of those language barriers. And I think those two are also quite important aspects, to kind of be tackled when you want to be truly inclusive. And yeah.
To complement what you just said, Ann-Kristin, we started working with linguists because we recognize the importance of careful translations in multilingual participatory stakeholder meetings where we engage with communities and authorities and scientists. And if we are not careful in translation, we lose meaning. We speak about epistemicide, and we can overcome this only with a very mindful, careful translation. The best experience I have in Guatemala working with Maya communities, where we had simultaneous translation, and that helped enormously because we could quickly ask back if something was not clear in translations. In all these things, we have to be aware of the power differentials. You should be aware that the public health and medical sector have about 30 times more power in terms of money, personnel, and so on over animal health and environmental sectors. So we need somebody outside of that, these sectoral approaches that really manages or moderates these meetings. On a government level, the prime minister should play such a role, or the finance minister. On any other level, we need somebody who is an honest broker to make sure that all the parties can speak at eyesight and everybody is heard. This is fundamental to societal problem solving. So this is our experience, almost 30 years, mostly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America.
Thank you for that. I think focusing on the power differentials is really important and something that maybe we forget occasionally. And I know my own experience being in the veterinary world, when you talk to a medical doctor, a human doctor about One Health, they're like, what are you talking about? So even, just coming at it from that way. One thing that's wonderful about this panel is we have representatives from different career stages, and we have a lot of early career attendees for our summit. So I was just wondering if each one of you could maybe give a little small piece of advice about, your own career path. Again, we have a lot of people attending who are sort of trying to have a career in EcoHealth and One Health, and maybe things that have helped you along the way. It'd be wonderful to hear about that.
Maybe I can just start because I'm end of career. I will retire in 6 years. And I can tell you it is wonderful to engage in EcoHealth or in One Health, because bringing together different sectors and in particular also academic and non-academic actors is wonderful. And I would do it again, definitely. So I give you my view. First of all, we are still in an academic world that is paved by some good papers and grants that you can acquire. So first of all, you must be recognized in your own academic discipline. So it is wise to generate a few papers where you can make yourself known. But from there, I recommend you to open up onto other disciplines. So I open to public health or to sociology or to mathematics or molecular biology, and then open up also to society, to neglected populations, to authorities, and bringing together non-academic actors, bringing together the knowledge of communities and authorities was for me the best experience. So it is good if you don't think you have to do everything at once. So if you are early career, I recommend you make yourself known with a few good papers, but then expand to other disciplines, become systemic, and it is a eternal learning. Never stop reading, never stop learning. I'm very much into philosophy of science at the moment, because if you don't know why you think about the way you think, you cannot develop new theory. Become self-reflexive on your philosophical background. Because most of the time, in a multi-epistemic dialogue between, for example, Maya communities and modern Western medicine, you must know who you are, because only then you can see that Tuareg communities or Maya communities have completely different ways of generating knowledge than you have. And you become only aware of that if you know what means ontology or what means epistemology. These are fundamental terms in philosophy of science. So I wish you good luck and go for it. It is worthwhile, but we cannot avoid living in a still fairly traditional academic world. Yeah.
I just want to quickly add that I perfectly agree with the Professor Zinstak, and maybe just try to, I mean, if at university you didn't have a chance to get into this systems thinking approach, and try to, follow courses, do training. So try to explore by yourself this interconnectedness and try to apply it to your where you work, and try to be a champion, and maybe, bring this knowledge, this kind of mindset also to your colleagues, because, at the end of the day, not all the people who are working at the moment have this kind of mindset, this kind of knowledge. So maybe you could also be an important figure for, expanding the concept, and maybe one day you reach someone at key decision-making level, and maybe something will change, who knows. So yeah, so be a leader, be a champion. This once, of course, you have all the necessary knowledge and that you need, that of course will come with time, but it will come. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe to add to this, yeah, I would also say maybe as like an early career myself, be brave and be bold. Of course, like you have to be also self-reflective of the things that you don't know, like the experience that you know you're still gonna gain in the future. But I think generally also myself being like more from a humanities background, I also felt like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that especially one field is still quite dominated by the more natural sciences. I think also for me, coming let's say from like a bit of a different background, um, you know, like it's kind of like nice to see how you can find your path or like your space, and it is an interdisciplinary space in itself, ecohealth and One Health. So I think it's also very necessary that people from different backgrounds are actually motivated to take part. And I think in that sense is kind of why I'm saying like be brave and see the connections, maybe think out of the box, because it's also good to have those fresh perspectives, I think, from yeah, from early people. So I think this would be my advice.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just we have a great question in the chat that I'm going to read briefly, but I just wanted to put a pin in what Jakob said about in the example of you know, Mayan society, how they generate knowledge. Yeah, a big pillar of ecohealth is actually you know, engaging with communities and sort of relying and highlighting indigenous knowledge and perspective. So just kind of emphasizing that. But we do have a good question in the chat from Helen Doyle. It says, a common understanding of the terminology is important. I promote the ecohealth approach as I feel it better captures the pillars of human, animal, and environmental health. I feel, in Canada at least, that the term One Health is used more often, suggesting it represents the three pillars, and yet when examples are given, they are mostly related to human-animal interactions with less focus on environmental health. Interested in thoughts from the panel. So if you want to kind of go in the same order there, if you have any thoughts, that would be great.
I fully agree with that point. One Health indeed has a penchant towards bringing together human and animal health. This was also the purpose of my introductory statement, that we really need a formal theoretical and methodological evolution to include formally natural resource management into One Health. This is why we walk into this One Health in social ecological systems. I mean, for me, eco-health is broader than One Health. I fully agree with that. But what is very surprising is today, among all the integrated approaches to health, like eco-health, planetary health, One Health has the broadest institutional echo today. You know, we have the quadripartite, we have the One Health high level committee, we have the G7 that clearly wants to go into One Health, and many countries start to build up One Health platforms. And this doesn't happen with the term eco-health or with planetary health at the moment. But I would say, so we have to make sure that we don't lose track in the dynamics for One Health, but we must clearly include the environmental and natural resource sustainability in all the work we do. But that is difficult, you know. You need methods that bring together human and animal health and environmental determinants. And there I would argue that game theoretical approaches are very well suited, because you can put constraints on natural resource management or whatsoever to sustain biodiversity or to maximize carbon storage and so on. But we must go in that direction. Yeah. But to be clear here, I was very much inspired by Canada, both for the Canadian Integrated Program of Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance, which is completely integrated, but also the Canadian Science Center in Winnipeg, which is one laboratory for human and animal highly contagious diseases.
Yeah, no, I mean, I fully agree. I think that maybe the most important point here is, I agree that definition, univocal definition is needed for clarity of mind, a univocal methodology, a univocal, I agree. But I think that whereas I agree with Professor Zinstag, I think that One Health has more, how to say, recognition at, for example, at the global governance level and also national governance. So I think we should leverage on this. And I think that at the end of the day, the final goal of all these approaches is the same. But I really agree that the environmental sector and the social sciences sector have been long neglected in the approach. So I think that maybe we should really focus to find ways and methods to integrate these disciplines in the One Health approach.
And maybe just like a little quick add-on, because I think theoretically all three pillars are represented through One Health as well. But I think, and it's an interdisciplinary approach, but I think maybe also taking a look at the gap between science and implementation might also be worthwhile to see what is there and also how it's then implemented, to just maybe see the discrepancies in that.
Yeah, that's some really excellent points about the different disciplines, which of course are are closely related. I'm just looking in the chat here. There's a few questions maybe. Dr. Kosker, do you want to talk about your thought with translation? Maybe just bring it up for discussion to circle back to that briefly.
Do you want me to come in, Evan?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Maybe just pose a question to the panel after you explain what your thinking is there.
Yeah, maybe I should explain the background. So my own approach is informed very much from radical constructivism. So the work of people like Ernst von Glasersfeld, who demonstrated just how problematic the concept of translation is, and the extent to which meaning is constructed within a very complex social milieu, which is often, personal. And I guess we often see this emphasis on definitions, and that in itself isn't I think very helpful, because definitions are static, and we need to be looking at the dynamism of the process behind how meaning arises. So I guess I'm just a little bit skeptical about the extent to which we can translate, given what Jakob was emphasizing, the need for wider training in philosophical principles that inform meaning. So for me, this is a bigger educational project. We actually need to be educating at primary, secondary, and tertiary levels in ways that help us understand how meaning is actually arising in process, as a process, as a relational social field, and then it would become a lot easier to move between disciplines much more fluidly, and share understandings and check in with understandings. So I guess, yeah, I'm just wondering what people's thoughts are on the short, medium, and long-term aspects of this, because I don't think in the short term we can translate directly. I'm hoping that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I would invite Dr. Zinstag to maybe comment on that, and then if anyone else has some personal experiences with translation, or just trying to share understanding across language and cultural boundaries, which I think is what we're kind of talking about, it'd be wonderful if you could contribute.
I mean, I will give you two examples about epistemic, interepistemic dialogue. We were able to have a deep dialogue between Maya healers and veterinarians and medical doctors. So first we took a chicken that was ill, and I was examining it as a veterinarian, and the Maya healer was examining it from with his methods. And I came to the conclusion that the chicken suffered from a rhinitis. It was sneezing. And the Maya healer said primarily the whole farm was bewitched, and he had to do an exorcism on the whole farm, but also then applied a concoction of leaves to all the chicken. So we could not find any way of explaining of comparing the way we were generating the knowledge. Our epistemologies were completely different. But as a Western trained veterinarian, I cannot say what you are saying is crap, you know. And then we examined a woman that was ill by a medical doctor and by a Maya healer, and the medical doctor diagnosed a hernia, and the Maya healer diagnosed also susto, which is rather a illness like depression. And so again, we were not able to find consensus on how we generated the knowledge. And then we decided that the patient should decide what she needs. And she clearly said, first, I need a Maya ceremony and a prayer with the Maya healer, and then I will go for surgery. So by putting the patient in the center of action, we could avoid a cognitive dissonance between the two knowledge systems of modern medicine and traditional Maya medicine, and the patient received what she needed. I think one of the shortfalls of modern Western medicine is that it limits to the bodily function and ignores the spiritual dimension of health. And for many non-Western health systems include that in a much more comprehensive way. So for me, these are experiences where I see that we need to reflect on our own way, how we think. And modern Western medicine is very impregnated by a rationalist, determinist, positivist way of thinking. These are all things I learned from interacting with anthropologists and sociologists, where I understood that natural science makes many implicit philosophical assumptions that are not reflected sufficiently. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you for those examples. Oh, looks like Glenn, go ahead. You got a hand raised.
No, thank you, Evan, and thank you, Jakob, for that. I agree with so much of what you've said. I think the distinction I would make is that traditionally trained scientists, and certainly in the Western tradition, don't really understand the shift from debate into dialogue. So when you're talking about the rationalist approach, that is actually consistent with debate. So with what Martin Buber would describe as technical dialogue. I think what you were describing, though, was very much dialogical. There was an opening to other possibilities and, you know, an exploration of different social fields. And that was a great example, I thought, of you know, how you can integrate, you know, these various ways of knowing without there being any inconsistencies, any cognitive dissonance, as you've highlighted. So that was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if anyone else has some examples, maybe from their work, about sort of, you know, trying to bridge this gap. I'll briefly say that the description you gave, Jakob, is something that's familiar to me by working in Turkana in northwest Kenya, where often the Emeron sort of Turkana healer has a lot to do with livestock and human health. But then if that's not working, or you also want to kind of go and talk to the veterinarian at the county veterinarian. So I think sort of melding those two, I guess, types of medicine, if you want to call that, is quite common in different contexts. But does anyone else have a reflection on the translation or communication issue?
Maybe also connected to the thought, maybe not directly translation, but also just the value that is attributed to different knowledge systems in general. I think maybe that also maybe connects to kind of really understand the value of different knowledges, or what we kind of define as science, what do we define as knowledge, and who are experts, and kind of in this paradigm thinking. I think maybe this is also like kind of relating back to my point on what it means to be inclusive, and inclusive for who has access to these kind of tools or networks. And I think then also, well, as I said, also the language barrier might be one of the things that's like kind of an obstacle to create this more just and equitable discussions around different themes.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So we do have another panel discussion to get to, but just to wrap up, maybe if each panelist could reflect a little bit on the future of EcoHealth and One Health. I think we've covered a lot of those topics in the discussion. But basically your sort of vision for the future of how we address a lot of the issues that we've discussed today, whether it be emerging infectious disease, of course, pandemic, and then very real issues of climate change, biodiversity loss. I could sit here for 10 minutes and probably list off all these different things, but maybe just one or two takeaways of kind of how we can best work together going forward to create a healthy, just, and sustainable future. If Dr. Zinseg, you want to start, just so we can keep our same order, there is fine.
For me, I think One Health and EcoHealth should work together in as closely as possible. Essentially, we should bring together human health, animal health, and sustainable use of natural resources in a formal conceptual framework. Number one. Number two is we should be epistemologically modest, which means that we are open to non-Western epistemologies and also ontologies, that we are flexible on that. This does not mean that we need to make concessions on the excellence of our science, but we can only solve problems if we listen to all different ways of generating knowledge. And the last point is transdisciplinarity. As scientists, we should engage with non-academic actors, with communities, with authorities, listening to them, because often in my experience, these people have no formal education, but they are environmental experts. They are excellent observers, and they can teach us a lot if we listen carefully. So I think these are solid foundations to continue and work all together for a sustainable future.
Yeah, I think that from my point of view, there is a urgent need to generate evidence about methods and about the added value of adopting these kind of approaches to adopt One Health, both at institutional level and at community level. So to really to understand what kind of methods and what kind of results we are having by adopting these methods, and having something solid, I'm thinking, for example, about decision makers, policy makers. We really need to show them, that One Health is working and what are the benefits, both at institutional national level and community local level, in order to operationalize it. So I think that's an important step. Thank you.
Yes, I would also agree with like kind of the vertical and horizontal collaborations of from the field on policy level, and bring all of the different sectors together. But also at the same time, I think kind of this discussion on different knowledge systems, but also the values and actually seeing the intrinsic value of biodiversity. I think that would also be kind of my vision for the future. But yeah, I think apart from this, I also agree with what was said by the other panelists.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for those final thoughts. Does anyone have, I think two of our panelists need to leave at the end of this hour. So does anyone have some final questions or thoughts for them before we go to the next aspect of the session? Okay, wonderful. So now we're gonna introduce our next two panelists, one of whom we've already heard from, which is wonderful. So Dr. Kusker, and then also Dr. Sepe. So if you could both, we're gonna follow kind of the same general format, as in introduce yourself and a general topic that relates to our theme. And we can start with that for 4 or 5 minutes, and then we can go from there. So if whoever wants to go first, and then we can just keep that order just so we we don't have to confuse ourselves.
Okay, maybe I'll go first. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Ludovico Sepe. I'm based in Berlin. I work at the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment, and I wanted to bring to your attention two main initiatives, which relate very much to what we heard about in the first panel. These are two European initiatives. One just ended. It's called European One Health European Joint Program, and the second one is still ongoing. I mean, and it's called the MedVetNet Association. So why are they rather important? If you start with the One Health European Joint Program, this is a huge consortium, and we started working back in 2018, and we received funding from the. Do you want me to do you want me to talk right now about this, or should I give the word to Glenn so he introduces
Oh no,
himself?
you can talk right now. We've 5 or so minutes, and yeah, this introduction plus whatever topic you'd like to bring up.
Okay.
So these two initiatives. So this is perfect. Thank you.
All right. So the first one I was saying is the One Health European Joint Program. So we started back, that was 2018, and we received funding under Horizon 2020. For those of you who do not know, Horizon 2020 was the main funding strategy of the European Union. It's coming to an end, like really these days. This funding managed us to bring together 44 partners across Europe. So we had food safety institution, we had public health institution, animal health institution. And the important thing about this parties is that this institution is that they have received mandate from their authorities, meaning from the ministries of health or Ministry of Agriculture mostly. And all of them had received the mandate from the authority, meaning that the ministry said, okay, you go on and do the work of the One Health EJP. So what did we do? Thanks to the European funding, we were able to start, I think we had 30 research projects. We had the integrative project focusing on the foodborne zoonosis, on antimicrobial resistance, and on emerging infectious threats. So your classical One Health topics. Some of our researchers are your normal scientific research. Some of them, we call them integrative researchers, and they dealt mostly with the harmonization of approaches across the sectors and across the borders, interoperability of data. So really, how can the institution work harmoniously together? And then we also funded, I think, around 20 PhD students. We had many education and training activities. And this whole 5.5-year project resulted in, we had impact at various levels. So at the scientific level, we had almost 300 publications. we have developed new protocols, we have developed new methods, new reference material, everything. And most of this was actually operationalized because our partners were also the, for example, national reference labs. So they were able to use our resources at their during their daily work, which was fantastic. So not just the research, but also the operational side. We managed to have impact at the policy level. Our knowledge fed new policies. We had close contacts with the EU agency, with the EU policymakers, even with the international policymakers, with the quadripartite, for example. And we also trained the next generation of One Health experts. I'll talk a little bit more about the training initiative later, because that's pretty important, I think. So wonderful, but the thing is that these are funded initiatives that come to an end. So the EU told us, oh, by September 2023, you have to finish your One Health European Joint Program, your consortium. So we are done. One Health HAV doesn't exist anymore, but the good work, the results, and all the solutions are not lost. The MedvedNet Association stepped in and to sustain our results, our solution. The thing with the MedvedNet Association, which I will call the association for simplicity, is that now this exists for a very long time, almost 20 years. It started in 2004. Again, it's a network of public health, animal health, food safety institutions in Europe. The only thing is that it doesn't have any funding. It's voluntary. Nevertheless, we do organize training activities and education activities. And importantly, we keep in touch with the stakeholders, and also we keep together all the institutions that were part of the One Health European Joint Program, because what happened is that once one European initiative ends, then, and that was a large One Health consortium. So what happens now is that all the institutions, they go to the new funding, new European funding, Horizon Europe, and then they join different initiatives inside of that framework. So it looks like the network is scattered, is lost, but the MedvedNet Association keeps the institute together. The fact that one large One Health initiative becomes scattered in many more initiatives is another point that maybe I will come back to in a during our discussion, just to show how the European One Health environment is developing these days. So yes, rather relevant to our topics, both the initiative, I would say. Back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. And then Glenn, if you want to jump in.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me all okay, Evan? Good. I'm getting a nod from Ludovic. I think I've pinned you to my screen, Ludovic. So I will. Where shall I start? I think I should probably give you a little bit of background to my own journey, because I think it makes sense of my approach. So a long time ago, I was a wildlife vet, working a lot on wildlife health issues, but retrained in environmental and sustainable education.
Is he frozen for everyone or just me?
Yeah, also for me.
Let's see. Maybe I'll try to get in contact with him, just so we're not too disjointed here. Dr. Sepe, maybe do you want to talk about sort of the One Health atmosphere in Europe or environment in terms of how everything is sort of, oh, maybe he's coming back. We don't know. Yeah, if you want to just maybe talk a little bit about that, and we'll wait for him to come back. Sorry for the issues here.
Sure, yeah. So what we have seen, we started back in 2018. Back then, One Health was a rather new thing for Europe. You know that the EU comes always a little bit later compared to the Canada, for example, or North America. Oh, I see Glenn back.
Yeah, for some reason that drops out, which is a bit odd, but sorry about that. Shall I just pick up where I left off, or were you saying something, Ludovic?
Yeah, that's okay if that's okay, Ludovic. We'll just
okay?
yeah, if you just want to pick up, then we'll
Okay,
keep going.
so,
Sorry everyone.
So I think what I was wanting to articulate is that there's a whole ecosystem internally that we need to be exploring in order to really understand the ecosystems out there that we're needing to contribute to. And this, at many levels, involves a number of radical turns, including a post-humanist turn, to really understand ourselves as relational people. And I guess if there's a way of summarizing this, my interest is very much in how we bring relational health into One Health, into ecosystem, into ecohealth, and these sort of new ways of thinking about health. And that involves a number of different things. So at one level, relational health is founded on trauma awareness. So we have to understand how our nervous systems are affected by our experiences, and how our nervous systems filter the world and then inform our individual and collective awareness. And this is crucial if we're to develop our relationships to our thoughts, to our feelings, to each other, to the more than human world. There are aspects of health there that are predicated on our capacity to relate, and first and foremost relate to ourselves. So there's a lot of issues there, and I guess just to relate this to organizations who I think are working on this, the field of collective trauma, the science, I think is something that is very relevant to One Health, and has a lot of non-dualistic approaches embedded into it, which I think we can benefit from. It also has a very strong root in peace studies, which, given that the SDGs emphasize the need for peace in our world, I think is key. And part of that is making peace with ourselves in order to make peace with nature. So there are sort of some significant things there. The second organization I think that's worth mentioning that works a lot with the with different communities globally, but also with the UN, is the Presencing Institute, who I think have done an awful lot to develop our awareness of the power of awareness-based systems change, which fundamentally is dialogical. It's about deepening our listening to access social fields where there are much more possibilities available to us in terms of delivering the emergent futures that we're wanting to see. And I'm going to mention a third project which I think is very relevant to this audience because of the eco-health dimension. So the Eurogroup for Animals is a collective group who are working on animal welfare within the EU, and they released today a study on public opinion about the wolf and other apex predators within the EU, which is related very much to awareness-based systems change, because so much of the proposals for widespread culling of the wolf in particular across Europe come from our nervous systems, from a relationship to the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, and our struggles to actually coexist with threats, whether the threats be sort of literal or metaphorical, or very much filtered through our whole consciousness. There's an issue there around how we live with these bigger challenges, and we need to actually deal with those within our nervous systems if we're to actually embrace biodiversity at a systemic level. If we're to have healthy biodiverse systems, we really need to rethink, our ways of relating to that diversity, and that will start within our own nervous systems. I think that's probably covering a few things there. I can put in the chat some links, link to that report as well, which I think people may want to actually look at.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then, someone can add that link to the Padlet page as well. So I think just for follow-up, I have sort of specific follow-up for each of you. So if you could continue to talk about the One Health networks in Europe, I know we got a little interrupted there. And then I'm really interested in this sort of personal relationship with health that you're talking about and its broader application. And something that's coming to mind, which is linked to EcoHealth quite closely, is sort of indigenous perspectives and knowledge to the environment and health. So I wonder if there's any link there, Glenn, that maybe you could draw out a little more based on your experience. But if Ludovico wants to go first, and then we can go back.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I will just keep on where I left, which was how the European One Health environment changed during the years, and maybe even what can we look at with particular interest for tomorrow. So like really the challenges of tomorrow. What we have seen, for example, is that when we started back in 2018, European One Health was animal health and human health. The environmental component was a little bit overlooked, was very much overlooked, I have to say. Even in our consortium, which was a huge consortium, we didn't have any environmental institution. There were reasons for it, but it wasn't ideal, I have to say. Still, during the year, these things developed. It took some time because this has to go to the policy level. You need always the regulatory framework, and then you can, for example, add your environmental institution. We do see that there is more and more interest in the environmental side of One Health. The environmental side of One Health, meaning the wider environment as defined by the high-level expert panel, for example, so including the ecology, the biodiversity. We do see more and more focus on sustainability. So nowadays, if we are talking about European One Health, we are talking about animal health, we are talking about human health, but also about the environment, the wider environment. We do see that there are some timid attempts to include also other sectors, which are not traditionally very much linked with One Health. We have heard it in the dialogue beforehand. Sociology, anthropology, we are starting to seeing this, but this will take some time as well. We do see that, for example, the impact of climate change. Once we could focus on something else. Now we have to acknowledge it when we're talking about One Health in Europe. There's also more focus on the global dimension of One Health. One Health issues are now acknowledged to be, and I'm talking again about the European policy level, acknowledged to be global issues. We do see it with, for example, the EU Global Health Strategy, which was just presented a few days ago. We do see it in the support that European countries made during the G7 and the G20 to One Health, and so on. The Commission recently expressed their support for the pandemic agreement, for the review of the international health regulation. So really, Europe wants to be a beacon of good practice in global health as well as One Health. So this is making everything more inclusive. This is, of course, a major step forward. But we also have seen a rather important political change, which is when we started back then, we were talking about One Health, and One Health was seen indeed as a large as a wide sector where everything could come together. This was again not clear, a little bit vague, but now what we see in European policies is that we cannot expect to have an overarching EU One Health approach. This is not happening. We are not going to see a One Health Institute, for example, but in all the policies that are dealing with public health, that are dealing with AMR or chemical in the environment, we do see the One Health approach being acknowledged, and we do see support for, even if still at the overarching policy level or overarching political level, we do see that there is this support, at least in word, for cross-sectoral collaboration. So that's, I think, the other thing to keep in mind. One Health exists, but they do not, well, according to the Commission, One Health should not become another silos. It should be an overarching approach included in many policies. So something else to keep in mind when we deal with the EU political level.
Yeah, that's a really interesting maybe shift where it's more distributed, if I'm understanding your point correctly, and kind of maybe has become established. So now it's almost like, well, if we're doing AMR, we should include, One Health. So I'll pass it along to Glenn now and a little bit more discussion on that topic.
Thank you, Evan, and thank you, Ludovic, for that as well. My understanding, Evan, was you wanted me to speak to how we can be more inclusive of indigenous ways of knowing. But did you want to expand on the question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just curious if you have any personal experience, and if not, obviously that's fine. But one thing that we sort of think about in EcoHealth a lot is sort of including indigenous perspectives and knowledge, which, based on the first discussion we've had this session, are quite different. So I'm just wondering if the transition that you're talking about maybe could be helped along or supported by including those indigenous perspectives, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I think there's several things to be said to that. So one of the things that I'm bringing into my teaching, and this is the direction I want to take my teaching in, is the integration of mindfulness approaches into awareness-based systems change work for health. Within sort of indigenous cultures, probably globally, and I've put a link to the Rooted Messages project in the chat, is a recognition of our intra-connections with the more than human world. So the very understanding of the self and of the human is different ontologically, I think, in these cultures. And I think this is one of the problems this is one of the colonial issues that we face, is we've really got to decolonize our idea of the human from our sciences. It's also why One Health urgently needs to bring in the arts and humanities and theology into these conversations, such that we can actually do that. The kind of work that's being done within the fields of mindfulness, we'll be exploring the use of psychedelics, for example, to allow us to use our right hemispheres much more as a way of relating. It will use just very standard mindfulness practice to actually explore this. And I think one of the things that can shift then is the anthropocentrism of One Health, that I think characterizes, understandably, because it emerged from a collaboration between vets and doctors, and there's a lot of power within those two fields, particularly financial power. So there's a lot of things there. From an educational perspective, I think there's a need for us to recognize the challenge that the UN has laid down in its agenda for learning for sustainability, which I think speaks to this theme today. And that's that historically our emphasis education has been knowing about and knowing how. And we haven't really done the other two bits of the learning for sustainability agenda, which is learning to be and learning to live together. And I think Indigenous peoples have got that sussed. You know, they know what is involved in learning to be and learning to live together. So that's something I think that when we're talking about education in One Health, in EcoHealth, these are big shifts in the emphasis in our training that we need to be looking at. So I guess those were a handful of things just to throw into the mix there. I guess, you know, some people talk about it in terms of decolonizing. I think that requires us to really understand the extent to which we have been colonized by a very reductive understanding of who we are. So Dan Siegel describes it as the pandemic of the solo self, being one of the root causes of all the other pandemics.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and thanks for bringing that perspective. I just want to see if there's anyone who has any questions or any comments on those kind of more recent topics before I ask the next question. Okay, so I wanted to touch a little bit on education, which you've both mentioned. So talking about, you know, educating the next One Health workforce, and obviously, you know, Glenn, you've mentioned education number of times. So maybe just touching on that, but also we can use this opportunity to, you know, give some type of advice or lessons learned, maybe in your own career, about working in this field. Again, we have a lot of early career attendees to this session, and so, you know, just sort of some words of advice, and then maybe just in general about the One Health or EcoHealth education would be wonderful to touch on.
It's a great question, Evan. I'm not sure where to start, but I'm going to go with your the theme for today, which is you know, a just and sustainable future, and say something about inclusivity. And within education, the challenge that we're faced with is how to shift from, you know, filling the container to actually nurturing the vessel. And a lot of that is actually about addressing, you know, one of the traumas that characterizes our world, and that comes from the attentional violence that is perpetrated on people when we fail to see their possibilities. So seeing a student, any student, you know, as a possibility that can be nurtured. And I think this relates to what Jacob said about the potential contribution of somebody being denied when they die young. You know, there are many ways of thinking about this, but I think Nussbaum's idea of flourishing in education is really key here. It represents a shift in our philosophical approach to animal. I'm going to bracket the word animal because I think we need to dispel animal from the lexicon as far as One Health goes. It's a deeply problematic colonial word concept. So I'm going to say the more than human world when I'm distinguishing from humans there. We need to actually recognize that that flourishing is something that, you know, every life form has it within its, you know, its essence, as it were. And what I'm seeing within teaching in One Health now is that, you know, we can find students wanting to explore all manner of things. So I've got 3 students this year who are looking at ADHD and looking at the various ways that we can bring a disabilities lens and other lenses to rethinking how we understand neurodivergence. And so being more inclusive of neurodiversity and of different ways of viewing the more than human world will actually rehabilitate perspectives on the world that I think have been excluded from, you know, the sort of traditional educational frame. I've got a student this year who's looking at sight loss as a superpower within One Health. So it's this idea that when you lose your sight, you actually become probably a better systems thinker because your relationship to the world shifts. So she will be exploring this in the first and the second and third person, looking at key thinkers whose world has been transformed by their own sight loss. So John Muir and Patrick Geddes being two great examples, but also her own sight loss. And she's a huge inspiration because she's actually rethinking her own understanding of One Health, and probably will end up redefining One Health through this very work. I'm giving you little examples of very person-centered educational ways of realizing somebody's own potential within the field of One Health. These students would never imagine they would be looking at this when they joined the our programs. I've got other people who've come to study conservation medicine with me, for example, whose passion has been photography and who've ended up becoming conservation photographers as a result of exploring ways of seeing, ways of then feeling into the world. And from a systems perspective, our challenge is not to see the world, but actually to feel the world, and then to help the system actually feel, see, and sense itself. So there's this systems approach that's needed where our own awareness of our relationality evolves. And I think this is a big educational project for me, is to try and get this to sort of materialize at an experiential level for each and every student. Hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Those are some wonderful examples of how to kind of expand education around the concepts that we've been discussing. So thank you. And Ludovico, if you want to also give some education sort of examples and talk about your experience with that, that'd be wonderful.
Of course, gladly. So I think education has a major role in overcoming one big challenge, at least that's in my experience in the last few years. Let me just spend just 1 minute to talk about the big challenge. Well, the main challenges that we have seen while working at the European One Health European Joint Program. I was working very much in the interface between the scientists and the policymakers and the decision makers. There's one has to be always very careful when talking with the policymakers. It depends on his or her background. So with certain decision makers, you could go a little bit more technical. With others, not really. In particular, with the politicians, right? You have to focus on. You have to be very brief. They don't have time, and their attention is limited because they have so many things to do. So you have to be brief on the spot. You have to be timely. There's one interesting topics, and you need immediately to focus on that topic and not to lose more time. And also, we have found out that they very much like focusing on short-term goals. These are people that have to be elected every 4 or 5 years. So you don't want to focus on a goal that it's a 20-year goal, which is often the case for One Health and EcoHealth. So we then see have seen major challenges, not when at the policy level, but at the level of, let's say, the institution, the practitioner, really the people that do the work. We have been working across the sectors for all these years, and this already came up in our discussion. People across the sector speak a different language. They speak a different language. They have different priorities, but still, if they join a One Health initiative, it means that they acknowledge the importance of cross-sectoral collaboration. So there is a will, but sometimes we don't understand each other. We have also seen that sometimes, this was not very often, but sometimes we do see the will of, let's say, keeping the status quo. One Health goes across the sector. So sometimes people see it as a perception of invading one's domain. For that, you need a lot of diplomacy. You need to be very careful how you talk. You need to have very precise aim, very precise goals in order to accommodate that. I think when it comes to these last two challenges, so having different languages and the will today to keep the status quo, there education and training has a massive role. If we if we train the new generation of One Health experts from an early stage, let's say from the university, if people join this training initiative and then at the same time maybe even organize this training initiative as you are doing right now, this really builds the new generation of One Health experts as people who have a habit of working together, which I think it's the most important thing, having the habit of working together, people that realize the importance of cross-sectoral collaboration. So with this, you are already building a strong, let's say, bottom-up approach to One Health, especially when it comes to the institutionalization of One Health, to the operationalization of One Health. Having people that know how important it is and that know how to work across the sector and across the borders, of course. Although I have to say that we have found more issues working across sector as across borders. But still, so this, when it comes, this is, let's say, a bottom-up approach, and then you also need the top-down approach. Bottom-up is not enough, because then you have a lot of will of working together, but you need a regulatory framework. Otherwise, you simply cannot. You cannot share data across the institute, for example. You have to be careful of the the GDPR, the privacy regulation, the data. You want to share the data, but then the data has to be interoperable across the sectors. There are all these practical problems, and these need a regulatory framework. For that, you need the top-down approach, which means that you need to go to the policymakers. Be brief, on the spot, timely, adapt the message a little bit. So these are all tricks that one could learn in time. If you put together these two approach, I think then really one could go towards the having an institutional One Health approach or operational One Health tools really used on the in the field. I think overall the main thing is not to lose the momentum that was given by us by the COVID pandemic. That really boosted the interest in One Health, both at the policy level but also at the grassroots level, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. With COVID, everyone kind of became aware of what this concept was, right? So how do we kind of harness and continue that through programs like the initiative that you were describing? Looks like Glenn has a hand raised there.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to pick up on some of the very good points that Ludovic was making there, but particularly this idea of a regulatory approach. I think we shouldn't underestimate the need to reform our organizations. When we actually look at the way the quality of listening within an organization, most organizations are still hierarchical, and an eco-health approach requires our organizations to move to a network, so where the listening is much more reciprocal. And this will allow much more vertical literacy to come into our systems of regulation, of governance, of actually interbeing, actually being with. There are some very good examples of countries, usually small countries, who are actually undertaking this reform. So the Welsh Assembly, for example, now has elected representatives for future generations. There are corporations who have on their boards representatives for the more than human world. So there would be board members who are bringing this in. The Irish state has probably done more than most other states, I think, to demonstrate the role of citizen assemblies in actually dramatically shifting the status quo within a nation. And they have recently had 4 key citizen assemblies, one of which was on the biodiversity challenge, to sanction significant shifts in how society understands a major issue. So they've done this around marriage, around abortion, around biodiversity. And I think this represents a shift in democratic process that we're needing to explore, across all of our communities, from the sort of local through to the global, there is a need for this. And I would describe this as a form of relational health fundamentally. It's actually about how the parts are related and how we move. In terms of systems thinking, it represents an acceptance and a recognition that we are actually in an open system. Most people, when they're kidding themselves that they're becoming systems thinkers, they're still engaged in closed systems thinking. And that's a function of power literacy and understanding how power works. So there's a lot there that's needed in an educational sense. And I think I'm hoping that future generations will become politically active. Daniela Sellermeyer recently was writing some great stuff on multi-species justice, and she drew on Hannah Arendt, who recognized that when she saw the burning of the Reichstag, she went from being a philosopher to being an activist. Daniela Sellermeyer, when she saw 3.2 billion animals burning in the Australian outback, had that same Hannah Arendt moment where she recognizes that fundamentally this requires us to be much more activist in our approaches. I guess because there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, did you have
Can I
something?
Can I add
Yeah, of
something?
course.
I don't find the hand up here in my Zoom. Doesn't matter. I'll just go like this.
Yeah, we can see
Thank
you.
you very okay. Thank you very much, Glenn. Actually, if I may just add one point to the good point made by Glenn is that now we're talking about including the civil society. So like the let's say the non-expert. This is something that it's generally good to do. It's good practice, as Glenn highlighted, but it's something that's also the if I may give a word of advice to the people that want to deal with European One Health, that the EU policy level, at the EU policy level, like the Commission, for example, they like it very much. If you involve the citizen, if you involve the the civil society, for example, with citizen science initiative, all this kind of thing. So it's not just good to do it from a operational perspective, but it's also good to show it to your funders, or to show it to the funding agency where you would like to get the funds from. So good to highlight.
There's one thing I would just add as well. So there's a difference between citizen assemblies and citizen science. And I think the power of a citizen assembly is that you're taking the consensus approach by the breadth of specialists to the citizens who are on that assembly, and their courage in making decisions will be greater than the politicians. And this is why it's critically important that we have political reform whereby that sanctioning of a more courageous approach comes back to the elected representatives, because that will speed up change quite significantly.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for that really engaging discussion about citizen representation. Just a quick question for both of you is, what would be some words of advice in terms of pursuing a career in this area? Or, how would you kind of go about it? What avenues to pursue for some of our attendees who are maybe a little more early in their career looking for opportunities?
I think my best bit of advice would be to listen to what's actually in your heart, and to really seek that alignment, that coherence with what you really care about. And that will mean that you're likely to be exploring the path less traveled, and we'll need people to accompany you on that path, perhaps, who won't know where that path is leading, but will be willing to share with you part of that journey. So there's a certain amount of courage there that's required to embrace that uncertainty. Just allied to that, just one last point. I think that the unfortunate thing about mainstream education is that it has emphasized answers, knowledge, certainty excessively. And so we are unfamiliar with embracing uncertainty, with living the questions. And I think the questions are far more important than the answers. You know, we have too many people who are seeking answers, seeking solutions to problems that we haven't even yet really fully understood. You know, the problem statements that we are dealing with are so far from being complete, and yet we're not recognizing the incompleteness of those problem statements. So there's a need for us to embrace a lot more uncertainty, and the acronym VUCA, I think, is key to this. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity are part of the world we're in today, and we've got to be, you know, willing to live with that. And it just requires a different skill set. So if people want to explore One Health, I think I would very much encourage them to follow their hearts, but also to develop a relationship with those with that unfolding process.
Yeah, if I
please jump in.
Thanks. Yeah, I was waiting. On the same line of thought. But again, I can only speak when it comes to strict EU One Health or EcoHealth, but One Health, that's what you would find in the in Europe, in the EU. I think from an early career point of view, it's important. What I would suggest out of my experience is that to join a lot of workshop, a lot of seminars on One Health, and then to organize them, to build your network. When it comes to setting up a new initiative, I think it's very much important to focus on the equity, on the fair representation. We've talked a lot about it. I'm certainly not the best person that could. I'm not an expert on this, but to whatever a global whatever global initiative, it's important to focus on the equity in terms of geographical equity. So, you know, it's not the funding country that should manage it's not just the funding country that should manage the initiative. It's important to focus on the equity from a gender point of view, from a sector point of view as well. You don't want just animal health, human health. You also want the environment, and this is increasingly true in Europe. So we are almost 33, and 33%. The three sectors, almost, not yet. I would say also, when it comes to the, again, strictly from a EU point of view, take a look at the emerging themes that are important now. So the inclusion of the larger environment, we've said that. The impact of climate change, again, you really cannot, you really have to acknowledge that in any kind of application that you're writing, if you want funds, if you're joining an initiative, that's important. Pay attention to the global dimension of One Health. The EU tends to be very, no, let me phrase it correctly. Some EU initiatives tend to be very centered on Europe, on the strict border of Europe, but we do see a shift here as well. So global dimension is important to acknowledge, and the slow but steady inclusion in One Health initiative of the social sciences, of anthropology. That's something really that we will see in the future. We don't see it now, but it's something to keep in mind if we want to keep up with the policy development and take a closer look at the emerging threats in Europe. Edible insects, synthetic meat, synthetic biology, and animal welfare. Animal welfare is increasingly important. It's increasingly recognized from really the policy point of view.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for both of those. Just to add a brief comment there, when you're thinking about uncertainty, something you said, Glenn, really resonated with me. And I would just point people to Ian Scoons, who's at the Pastries Center. I'm just putting it in the chat now, but that group, oh, sorry, let me just put it in. They have really focused on uncertainty within the context of pastoralism, which, you know, I could talk about for hours, but basically just this concept of moving with your livestock to where the pasture is, and pastoralists deal with uncertainty on a daily basis. And so if you're interested in that topic, I would highly recommend going to check out Pastries and Ian Scoon's work. The other thing I wanted to bring up briefly, kind of on the same topic around students, is I had the privilege recently of getting on a call with Dr. Nicole Redverse on a Planetary Health Alliance conference. And she was talking about the difference actually between teaching Indigenous and non-Indigenous students at her university, and brought up this idea that in her experience, the Indigenous students are a little bit more willing and able to engage with uncertainty as a concept and sort of understand that, you know, it's more about the exploration. Whereas I guess the more Western, in this context, and I relate to this very much, which is like, we have to know everything, we have to get A's. You know, we have this very sort of deterministic viewpoint, and I'm speaking of, as myself too, being that education system, and just sort of the differences between those. So I would just point you to her work as well. She's really an inspiring figure in EcoHealth. And it looks like, Glenn, you had wanted to make another point.
I was just absorbing your observations there, Evan. I think that's, you know, it's absolutely true what you're saying about that different relationship to life itself, you know, to fate. And much of my research work has been in the High Atlas of Morocco, and obviously they're now recovering from, you know, quite a devastating recent earthquake. And those communities historically were resilient because they had diversified their approach to life, and were able to meet, you know, you know, those uncertainties. I guess one thing that I just wanted to add in terms of the advice for future careers is that the world we've been part of is you know, is falling apart. You know, the historical professional roles that people were educated for are arguably, in many respects, no longer fit for purpose. You know, the idea that, you know, you trained to become a vet to treat, you know, a particular patient, you know, that's kind of starting to unravel, you know, in quite a significant way. And it means that people, when they're looking around them for role models, for ideas of whose footsteps they could follow in, are really going to struggle to see, you know, really good examples of that, because they're not trodden yet. You know, people of my generation were inspired by James Herriot, who was a well, he was a, you know, person who was making sense of the disappearance of horsepower from the British countryside, and a change in farming. And his writing is about a particular epoch where our relationship to the land and to life, you know, within the rural environment, within the countryside, was just starting to become industrialized. And so, you know, we've had a few generations who've gone through that now, and who've realized just what a train crash, you know, industrialization has been, and the devastation that's actually caused. And so this idea of there being jobs out there that we can just walk into, I think we've got to create them collaboratively. You know, we have got to create those roles and shape them in accordance with our values and our understanding of what the future is actually calling for us to bring into being. quite a big challenge, but I'm sure everybody's up to it.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes left, so let's solve that before we're done. I think we should be fine. But yeah, I just want to kind of bring things to a close here. So maybe kind of like I asked the last session, just a couple kind of your main takeaways from the discussion earlier and what we've been able to talk about the last hour or so. And sort of what do we need to do to create a healthy, just, and sustainable future?
May I
Yes, please. Sorry, I should have specified.
just some key take-home messages. Focusing a little bit more on how to operationalize what we learn, what we have heard. I think the first thing is to focus on, for whatever, for any kind of One Health, EcoHealth initiative, focus on equity, focus across the sectors and work across the sectors and across the borders, and the importance of education and training for building the new One Health experts. And then when it comes to the very practical very practical recommendation, I would say the first one is if there has to be a change, there has to be a change at the policy level, because you want to have this top-down approach. So it's important to learn how to communicate with the policymakers, considering the policymaker, learn different strategy of communicating with them, and then also support also this bottom-up approach. So building networks from a very early stage in the career across the borders and across the sectors. I think those are my main messages, main recommendations. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Quite hard to follow on from Ludovic there. I think building networks, I think, is a really good piece of advice, Ludovic. I guess if I was to give you an example of that, one of the things I'm seeing as being very exciting is when students come in with an idea and they actually network and they find people to co-create and develop that idea and bring it into fruition, when they come to do a dissertation. And what I try and do then is to find a pairing of supervisors from really quite diverse disciplines who will really help that sort of seed to germinate. And I think some students find it really exciting when they're actually being challenged by people from very different disciplines to evolve their thinking. I think the other thing I would add to that is that when we think of ourselves reflexively, our relationship to learning and to that process of becoming changes quite dramatically. And I think it's a question of paying attention to these things that are that we're not used to paying attention to. So in a relational sense, paying attention to the between. So the space where we meet and what is happening magically within that space is really valuable. It's time very well spent. Part of that involves cultivating our relationship to ourselves, which may sound a little bit introspective, but it's not navel gazing. It's actually about realizing potentials that otherwise will just lay latent. So I think that's a really key thing, and it will inform the materiality of everything that lies beyond ourselves. So when we bring that awareness into our ways of relating, our very research questions change. So the relationship between the researcher and whatever is researched becomes a relationship. I think my biggest frustration in One Health is that despite the work of people like Georges Canguilhem and Donna Haraway, people still talk about knowledge as objective. Georges Canguilhem said, over half a century ago, objectivity is a fantasy. It's something that we're sort of confusing. And so one of the things that I've really emphasized in our teaching is the need for us to teach methodology. people conflate methods and methodology. They don't understand that we have a relationship to knowledge, and that comes from our relationship to ourselves. So all of that has to be brought into it if we're to become collaborative, if we're to actually explore those relationships across disciplines, across differences, across all the different boundaries that separate us. So there's a whole lot there to actually invest in, and I think it's really exciting terrain to be exploring now. You know, I'm really excited. It's just there'll be a lot of inertia from, you know, the entrenched the entrenchment of the status quo, should we say.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up that part of the discussion. And I'd like to introduce or allow some time for anyone who wants to come in and add your thoughts. Please feel free to contribute, or if you have any questions. And then I'll maybe summarize just a bit about what we talked about today. But yeah, please jump in our final few minutes here.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of different topics, so it's probably not easy to wrap your hand about everything.
Yeah, so it looks like Christina has her hand raised.
Yes, everybody, this is wonderful to see this panel. And of course, we can continue here forever. And they're very interesting. And of course, we will invite you to come over to the next session, which is the Latin America, that we have very similar experiences. And one of them, as the languages, and was very clear in saying how it is a barrier. At the same time, we are trying to break that barrier, but not only like language as countries, but as also, and was very pointed out, Ludovic, as you said, top to bottom, bottom to top, we also have to learn that language as well, which is very difficult, but we're breaking the barriers. And thank you very much, Glenn. I was like, you opened my mind a lot. That was very interesting, very discussions. And Dr. Zinstag bringing out the knowledge that we have to learn on his experience, and also the knowledge of the indigenous peoples as well. So I just wanted to briefly just say how wonderful the panel was, and thank you very much for being here. But I just wanted to put, as we will follow up with the Latin America, how similar experience, but how maybe a question, how can we join, for instance, these experiences from the north and south and east and west, and I don't know how we're going to do that. So if you have any comments, thank you.
Can I go, Evan? I've got something straight away, I think.
Yeah, please do. Thank you, Christina.
I'm not sure, Christina, if you're a fan of Paulo Freire, but I wish more people were familiar with his work. And I think as an example of somebody from Latin America who should be, you know, compulsory reading for anybody working in One Health, I think he's one of my inspirations.
Yes, I learned a lot. Thank you.
Please put the name in the chat too for recommendations.
The name of it. We will share.
Yeah. So this has been a fantastic. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ludovic.
No, I just want to say that this goes really back to the whole topic of building a network. So how do we work together? You know, the Europe and Latin America or whatever. Well, if we build a network from a very early stage, like you are doing now, that's the perfect starting point.
Yeah, and I think that just highlights, you know, the excitement that we have for this event, and hopefully to continue it and working with EcoHealth International. I just want to really extend a huge earth hug of gratitude to our panelists. It was wonderful to hear from all of you. I feel like we had a really enriching and enlightening discussion, and I'm really looking forward to continuing it for the next session, which starts in an hour, but also just you know, other opportunities that we have to connect going forward. I think this is a great leaping off point. So thank you very much. And thanks to our volunteers, everyone behind the scenes who's working in the chat and monitoring the Zoom. And yeah, I think maybe Angel, do you want to lead the photo? We would like to get a photo.
Yeah, sure. For anyone who does want to take a photo of the session, if you can turn on your camera just momentarily, and I'll take a little screenshot so that we have a track of our session. So excitingly, we have 2 pages. We'll have to do it twice. Okay. Oh, that's so nice. Okay. So I'll count to 3 twice. The first one for the first page, second for the second. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. Do it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Edwin, would you mind telling us the story behind the image on the screen? I'm just very intrigued by those 3 butterflies and how big they are. Is there a story there?
Yeah, the story is that I discovered Canva, which is a graphic design software. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's quite a powerful software. And we were looking for poster designs and wanted something that sort of linked, to EcoHealth and One Health. And this just happened to be one of the designs that was on there. And we all really liked it because, you have the built environment, obviously the houses and things. Now that I'm looking at it, I guess those things in the middle kind of look like wind turbines to me, but I'm not quite sure what they are. And then, of course, the